Hi, and welcome to the Kelly Kitley Podcast, America's Social Worker Unfiltered, where every week I have hopeful, honest, and deeply human conversations with changemakers. And today I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest, Cohen Miles-Rath, who is the author of Mending Reality, an advocate's existential journey with mental health. He's also a speaker, a mental health advocate, a new father, and I recently heard him on the Armchair Expert Podcast, and he had me at marathon or runner, elite runner, and social worker. So thank you so much for saying yes to being a guest on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you, Kelly, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and do some different type of social work. We're being social, but it's sharing our stories and being vulnerable, and that's part of the mission is as social workers. So I'm just happy to be here and share it with you.
Thank you. And you have lived experience and you study social work. And, I have to tell you, I came across the episode that you did on Armchair Expert and I listened to it. And it's a long one, not 30-minute snippet like mine. And I was just enthralled. And then I downloaded your book on Audible and listened to the full 7.5 hours in one sitting. So I feel like I am just getting you in real time and your vulnerability that you share through your story. And I know that we don't have the time to be able to cover it from start to finish, but something that
Mhm.
I do really want to focus on today is your journey with managing schizoaffective symptoms and substance misuse in your life and how that led you into the profession that you're in.
Mhm.
Um, and your message and mission as somebody who is in recovery and works a program of recovery to manage your mental health.
Mhm.
So I know that's a broad range, but for the sake of listeners and something that you mention in your story is just the fear. When somebody hears about auditory hallucinations or visual hallucinations and feeling like somebody is claiming to be the prophet is so scary. And so I really want to get to the human piece of who you are underneath that and what you've learned about yourself. And something that is also a thread is like people, I don't want to say people failed you, but people missed how they could support you and help you. And that is a
Mhm.
big piece. You say a lot in your book about the what ifs. What if I didn't go to the hospital? Or what if I had murdered my dad? What if I didn't have the opportunities and privileges I had? Like, there's so much to dissect in this, which then I think goes back to what your mission is and what you're doing today as a
Mhm.
social worker. So I'll turn it over to you and just begin as the spirit moves you and where you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I think you bring up excellent overview of a lot of heavy topic and heavy and really challenging things to understand. And what I think this gets to, and something that I've made a part of my mission is to reveal the complexities of someone's mental health, and not just the mental health, but the mind as well, and these things that can happen that can, whether it's depression or psychosis, that can take people to places where others can maybe not even imagine unless you're able to take them there, right? So a lot of my purpose in sharing my story, because it is such a heavy and hard topic to understand. Not a lot of people understand psychosis to the not very well.
Mhm.
And so part of my goal is into diving in and pulling someone in my shoes is so that others can understand it more and empathize with it more too, because you know, my story obviously led to something very tragic, a major incident that completely altered who I was and am today. And I always felt the need ever since that had happened to not only tell my story to myself. At first, I was just telling it to myself so I could heal from it and I could grow from it and I could build a foundation in which the future of my life will be more successful. And then, aside from that, it also eventually morphed into telling it to other people. And that's kind of where I started to share my story more publicly in the book and now in various podcasts such as here. So it's been like an ongoing mission, and it's going to continue to grow, I hope. But I also wanted to make sure in my process in doing that is I'm also bringing like mental health professionalism to the space as well. It's not like when we say lived experience, to me, it's lived expertise, right? Like I've studied
Oh,
I've studied the clinical elements of social work and direct service. I've studied the systems and the dynamics that have a role, the interpersonal, the individual, the community, and the socioeconomic side of all things to really take the story and pick it apart to another level, hopefully, for to get a much broader and more complex picture. Because to me, that's what's really needed when we're trying to understand
mhm.
the entirety of someone's mental health journey.
Yeah. I love language and I want you to correct me anytime that I say something that may feel offensive to you or is different language that you use because
Mhm.
something that you had said too was this idea about labeling somebody with a disorder, right? That can feel
Mhm.
really shameful. It can also be very helpful because we know how to treat disorders.
Yes. Yeah.
So the language that we use and this across the spectrum too,
Yeah.
in terms of educating what that looks like.
Yeah. I think, and that's, when how I view, and a lot of this is also, I feel like my view on how I things because it works for me, but I do think there is a very delicate balance with how we might take these disorders or diagnoses that we get and apply it to ourselves because you can't take every behavior and be like, oh, that's just because of my disorder, right?
Right.
It's not that simple. But also like you have this heavily evaluated, researched diagnosis that comes from a book that the DSM that spans decades of in-depth research to help us know a part of your experience that you could take value in, and so it helps you manage your mental health state. So, I when it comes to like language and being offensive, I try to find this delicate balance and then how we talk about these things because I also realize that there's a lot of various perspectives on how people want to understand them and talk about it, and how I might talk about psychosis might be very different from someone else who might talk about their schizo-related illness, and that's okay, right? Because we can all find our own path in that.
Yeah, yeah. That's a new word for me, lived expertise or statement. I love that. And you know, going
Mhm.
back to how old are you now?
I am 32.
32 years old,
Yeah. Yeah.
relatively new father as of 6 months ago.
Yep.
Um, the relationship that you had with your dad growing up was so formative in the person that you are. And when you look at a strengths perspective in social work, it seems that that was a common thread for you, your relationship with him, and then um, the incident that you have. How would you describe the quote unquote incident in terms of leading up to it, what happened, and what happened after? Because
Mhm.
I think that you lay it out in the book so well. Um, and if you were to give somebody, that's like a Cliff Notes version, right? Like, okay, tell me that here you were, this like elite college runner, and
Mhm.
you were smoking a
Yeah.
lot of marijuana. And the reason I
Mhm.
say that is because I related to the insanity of I was either focused and driven and running marathons and clean, so to speak, not drinking or, doing drugs, or it was the total opposite, that
Mhm.
you talk about injuries that you had in running and how that would kind of create this depressive episode. And then you were increasing alcohol use and misuse
Mhm.
of substances. And um, gosh, I have so many questions. I need more time, and I certainly can, but I'm so curious about just how how you narrate your life experience.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. What I love that you brought up initially was that strength-based from my dad early on in my childhood, because that really set a strong foundation for how I kind of grew up and his influence on me, where he did play into what my strengths were. It was, at some point it was drumming in high school, and it became running, and it was never about the academics necessarily, but that was okay because my dad emphasized what I found passion in, and that really, did send me on this path in which I found, traditional, what we see as traditional success, right? Going to college, like I was the first one to go to college, so that was a big deal for my family. But what it also did was set this pressure and standard on me. And a lot of people feel that some form of pressure at some point in their life, right? You're going to feel that. Again, going back to these transitions. So I was transitioning to adulthood, relying on my athletic identity to get me there. But when that started to falter, and it didn't happen all at once, right? It was a steady stream of mental health challenges, how I like to frame it, because, well, also just general challenges. I mean, I was going through injury after injury, so these physical things were happening and preventing me from succeeding as much as I could in running. But that was also having this mental health impact. Now, the difference is I was never addressing the mental health side of my experience. It was always healing the injury, get back to running, healing the injury, get back to running, but I never ever at one moment ever thought about the mental impact of my injuries. So eventually that led to, well, what did I latch on to help cope with those emotions and those mental health difficulties? It was substances, right? Being
yeah.
in the college party lifestyle, it was there. It became an everyday thing,
Mhm.
drugs, alcohol. And
Socially
then,
acceptable environment to be
yeah.
engaging in that. Sure.
Yeah, the party, it's we can't ignore that aspect of college life, right? It's there. We
Yeah.
could set up protective factors to help, prevent people from misusing these substances. It's okay to party, but when you start to misuse it to an unhealthy level, that's where other challenges usually come about. And for me, it started to morph into mental illness, just this pre-condition that I had, and everything. It just kind of like intensified it, where I started to just morph into having early signs and symptoms of mental illness, early signs of mania, early signs of psychosis. That went on for a while, where I was just starting to get warped into this like psychosis narrative that would really come on very strong in the months leading to the incident with my dad.
I'm going to get tearful because the way you describe your experience in the jail cell,
Hmm.
I know I'm jumping ahead. And something that you say is, people can Google your name and find information. It was publicly displayed in the media. Um, and the short version of, I mean, the auditory hallucinations, the visual hallucinations, feeling that, your dad was the devil and you needed to kill him in order to save humanity. And immediately after you had attempted to murder him and he was able to get out of the house, you had regret. And like the pain, like it's one thing, and I can't speak to it because I haven't experienced it, but the way you describe it in your book is like, it's one thing to like really believe your delusions, right? And think you're living in this reality. And then
Hmm.
another to like feel this pain of harm you could have caused, and then the despair when you recognize the fine line between having some memory of things or auditory hallucinations or visually, but being in sound mind, right? And needing to tell on yourself is what I say is sharing
Hmm.
what's going on for you in your mind with somebody else to get to a safe place and to get the help that you need at that time. That
Hmm.
awareness piece.
Yeah, and you know, like for me that the psychosis journey that I really went through, it was all consuming. And it wasn't, I know some people who have like, you know, schizophrenia or various diagnoses, and I still, I can go into, and this is me jumping ahead
Yeah.
later on, just like the, bit more mild symptoms that kind of continue on a regular basis.
Okay.
But for me at that time, it was like completely all consuming, where I was like, my mind was just completely warped into this world that it was real to me, right? When
Right.
people say it's a break from reality, psychosis, I'm like, well, it's a break from your it's different than your reality and what we see as normal. But for me, it was real. All
Right.
of it.
Right.
It was my reality. Like that's, and yet there were moments when I kind of had this mind bending step back from that reality, and the moment in which you describe, and where right after the incident, right after my dad, I literally thought he disappeared. Like he ran out of the house, but I don't remember. Like, I was in a delusional state, so I thought he disappeared. And as soon as he did, I was just like, wow, he's gone. And then that I think there's that innate human just side that was like, I lost someone that I love. I genuinely thought that he was gone forever, and that brought me back to like kind of snap out of that reality that I was in, to be like, oh my God, he's gone. And I did it. And that's when I started to really feel a heavy weight of shame and guilt, that kind of followed me into jail.
And grandma was there. She bared witness to all of it.
She did, yeah. Um, I think she had, you know, she's an old lady. She couldn't do a whole lot. I think she was probably in shock for the most part. And I think my dad was also in shock.
Yeah.
And, I think for both of them, it was just, as traumatic as it could be. And, but I'm grateful that we all made it out, honestly.
Well, and I think part of the reform that you bring to the surface has to happen in jail. Like, why are we putting people who are experiencing psychosis in a locked cell? That I think, and you speak to your commitment to education. Where was the education around working with a cross country team for mental health? That has to be part of the equation for athletes, right? Like it all connects. And so there are some mishaps in the system that I think you're working hard to find holes, and whether that's through policy or larger system changes. That's what was so eye-opening to me, that the experience of, I'm thinking that in my social work hat, like, so you were discharged from the hospital and there was like no follow-up or like wraparound services initially, right, in the first
Yeah.
psychiatric
Yeah.
experience in the hospital. So that was clear from my social work lens, but like from a family perspective, they were like, okay, you're good now. Like, right. You went to the hospital, like,
Yeah.
you can take some medication, maybe like back to normal.
Yeah, there really is a multifaceted approach here that I like to really use, because it is one thing to say that, like, oh, well, maybe the particular hospital or the jail system isn't set up or struggles to support people with mental health, but also it touches every facet. It touches the family, the college, the athletic department, like the way that we talk about mental health can go as far as back as childhood, right? And I think there are certain initiatives. I'm huge into prevention, huge into setting up a good structure of prevention, because I think if we have the in-depth knowledge and understanding and willingness and quality way to talk, effective way to talk about mental health. When people get to those points of intervention, they're more likely to be successful because we have that baseline knowledge and understanding of what is happening. So like, um, I think of like how New York State just is going to start doing teen mental health first aid in every school district. That was a law that was passed this year where New York State is going to fund we want every teenager to take teen mental health first aid, right? That's a huge step forward because as a mental health first aid instructor, I know that it trains people to better handle people who are going through mental health difficulties and even crises. So if we have more people having that baseline understanding and we all have a consensus with it, we're more likely to prevent crises moving forward.
Mm.
Um, and then you speak about that first hospitalization where it's like they discharged me and there was no plan or anything. Well, there's a program for that now. And actually, they did exist back then, just not in my area, but it's called On Track New York,
Okay.
where it's a program designed to intercept people who are going through first-time episodes of psychosis, because that requires a very unique approach, because
Yes.
it's not going to be something that just, comes naturally to even the hospital system. Like the hospital system might not be designed to support that, but there are ways that we can start doing that. And that's just one example. So
Okay.
like to me, this is why I like to look at it, in this complex way because it helps to really find where the holes are and find something that we can plug in there to start making greater systemic and cultural change.
Mm. Well, and years later, I mean, after you were released from jail, you talk about all of the support that you had, with a substance use counselor, right? A
Yep.
therapist, a
Group therapy.
psychiatrist, group therapy, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
having that support. And, my hope is that we take those interventions much sooner, right? And so for me
Yeah.
to hear, you can't, a small town you grew up in, right? So maybe didn't have as many resources at the
hmm
time.
Yeah, I mean, well, after jail, it was, yeah, my small community did actually have a good amount of resources. I mean, I didn't move. My dad was a smaller community. It's all
Okay.
small
Okay.
towns,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
there was a shared wealth of resources there that I had access to at that time. But, I'll say the big difference between before jail and after jail, and this is why I think the peer voice is so important, is because not only did I finally accept my diagnosis, I let go of that shame and stigma of being associated with it, right? Because that's really a big, major barrier was for me early on, was just not wanting to be associated with it.
Hmm.
That was gone. But not only did I accept it, I embraced the treatment that was available in a way that got me to actually learn how to effectively manage my diagnosis. So I was very vulnerable with my psychiatrist in jail. I was very active in wanting to know every information I could get about psychosis. And why? Because I was absolutely terrified of it happening again. I was like,
Yeah. Yes.
and I saw it as a responsibility too, because clearly something was messed up. Like I would have not tried to kill my dad in any other state of mind, right? Like that
Right.
clearly showed to me that I needed help as much as I can. And I think a lot of the challenges people who maybe go through when it comes to in going into the hospital or having a diagnosis and is just being okay with it and
Mhm.
wanting the help and then being active with it, right? I've always believed that you're only effective with your therapist as vulnerable as you are, because your
Absolutely.
therapist has to know how to work with you. And if you're not opening up about it and you're not bringing that to the table, I'm not sure what the growth will look like, because to me, at least in my experience, that was so critical to my growth.
Hmm. Sure. And you make that known. Had there been interventions earlier on, you don't know if you would have been open to receiving them at that point. And I think that
Yeah.
that's an important piece in mental health or substance use disorder across the board is a lot of times there is an understanding that when that person is ready, they will accept the help that is given to them. But we also want to make sure that we don't wait until it's too late as well,
Mhm.
right? And the other component of this that is so huge, it is the family dynamic piece that you talk about. There's mental health issues on in your family of origin, and you said that you can speak about it because your dad has been open about his own diagnosis with bipolar disorder. And um you have a child now, and you're going to be as open as you can and
Mhm.
as vulnerable as you can about your experience. And so that responsibility to educate our families about mental health, similarly as we would if somebody had, cancer in their family, and how to take care of yourself physically if you have a higher predisposition.
Yeah, the family culture is definitely something that I want to make a change with, in comparison to my own family, because yeah, my dad did have a diagnosis. My family does have a history of alcoholism, substance misuse. There's someone in my mom's family who has schizophrenia. So that these are all like there, and
Uh-huh.
I'm not really learning much about it until after everything had happened, right? Which is
Right.
okay, so me, my current family, and actually me and my partner, we were just talking about it the other day. And she asked me, she's like, "Well, when do you think we should talk about your story with Sylvie? Like, what age? Because you want to be appropriate with this
Right.
too, right? Based on whatever age they are." And I don't know, but we're already starting that conversation, right? Is when are we going to approach this, and how are we going to approach it? Because we know we're both social workers. We know that.
I mean, you're in a long-term relationship with a social worker?
Yes, she's got a clinical license though, so she's an LCSW.
That's
Big,
me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
How did you guys meet? I love it.
I mean, that was definitely one of the first things that we probably bonded on.
Oh,
But we met online,
yeah,
new age of
yeah,
dating,
yeah,
dating apps. I made a point to put social worker in my profile. She made a point to put social worker in her profile. So
yeah.
that already kind of helped, set the foundation.
It's a badge of honor. So she's
Mhm.
very psychologically savvy, I'm assuming.
Yes. But yeah, I still have yet to get my license though. I'm an MSW. I went the macro route. That licensing,
Mm.
the thing is I don't need my license to do my job, but I want to get it at some point. I don't know if I ever want to go into direct service. I've been more invested in peer direct service, it's
Interesting.
providing peer support,
Okay.
which there are good certifications out there for that. I
Mm.
did get my peer specialist certification, just to, understand that type of approach, which
Okay.
pulls a lot from social work. It kind of has elements relatable,
Yeah.
but more peer oriented.
Yeah. Can you hold up your book for people who are watching
Oh,
and watching on YouTube and not listening on Spotify? Mending Reality.
no.
Okay. That was almost a year ago, right? When was the pub?
Yes. It's
July
been out for a
22nd?
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said that writing is has been a very big part of your recovery and your mental health journey. What made you decide to write the book? Did somebody come to you? Did you say, I want to put this out there? Did your family have any reservations? Sometimes family members have a reaction to memoirs. I know mine did.
Yeah. Well, I think one day I feel like I always had an inclination to write just in general. I think I talk about in my book how I like to screenplay write at some point in my mental health journey. So I just like the storytelling. I just love storytelling, and then I feel like I started writing it once I got my job after grad school. So I'd finally kind of grounded myself financially and professionally, and then I had extra time. Had no partner at that time, so I had a bunch of time extra, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna start writing one day, and then I did, and I wrote and I wrote, and it took me 5 years of very intensive writing. Like it was not like, oh, I was writing here and there. It was like hours every day. I was waking up at 5:30, going to bed at 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
spending every window outside of work dedicated to crafting this story.
Mm.
I think I had like 13 drafts. It's just like something, a huge learning curve with it. And every step of the way, I'd get feedback from people. So I did bring it to my parents at some point. I can't remember what draft I brought it to. It was an earlier draft, but I definitely wanted them to feel comfortable with what I was putting out there. So I really wanted, and then my sisters, some of my other family members too. I definitely shared it with them to just make sure that I was being accurate in things that I was saying. We had conversations about it, and I kind of set the stage for them that this. At that point, I didn't know if it was going to get published or not, so it was always like, oh, maybe, maybe not. But I got them to be good with it, and I think ever since it's been out there, they can sense the hopefulness that it brings.
My gosh. And just to have to relive all of those experiences, when you pull up case notes and, you were able to get all of those.
Yeah, yeah, I went back and I did my research with it, and I actually it was fascinating reading all those police records, jail records, hospital records. It was fascinating little moments in time because I'm writing this, many years later, so I'm kind of like looking back at this time and reliving it. Yeah, it was triggering. Oh, it was definitely like I remember literally writing some nights and thinking and continuing to think a little bit too much into the night and or starting to kind of have some mild symptoms being resembled because I was kind of like re-triggering this experience, but I was in a place that I was, managing my life in a very healthy way, and I could work through those feelings. And at some point, it actually felt quite healing to me to get it all out there because I think a major difficult part in my experience with this, and this could be relatable to those who have experienced psychosis,
Yeah.
is just understanding psychosis. Like just coping with that takes, because there's so much uncertainty and so much mind-bending thoughts that come with it that it takes a lot to really just grasp it and be okay with it. But the book helped me get there.
I don't have words. I mean, I think about like your daily living skills and how a lot of those went to the wayside, right? Like you weren't eating, you weren't sleeping, you weren't bathing, I mean, and so that is such a core element sometimes of how we gauge, like, when I ask my clients, they're like, why are you asking me these questions? Have you moved your body? Have you slept? And I think that those are indicators, but I am curious, without getting into too much of, medication, or if you're, sometimes smoke pot or drink alcohol, or those components, because I think every individual is different, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but how do
yeah,
you manage on a daily basis? How do you take care of your mental health?
yeah. I mean, I think there's always, um, just having that past and that history and having it written down in such an intense way and living with it for so long, like that is kind of, it's always in the back of my mind. And, I think I, you know, I still struggle definitely sometimes, particularly with just, you know, work-life balance. Like I haven't been able to do my favorite thing as much as I could recently, which is running. I love to run, and it's just, and I've been struggling with that recently, and it's definitely having an impact. So sometimes it's making sacrifices because now I'm spending more time with my daughter and my family, and there's a lot of other things going on that might take more precedence. So there's ways that I have to work within my circle in my life that I have to adjust to better support myself. Various symptoms, can, come about. I mainly experience probably depersonalization and derealization on a regular basis, where just things don't feel real or feel fake, and
Hmm.
there's a very, I among my story I also had a very strong philosophical journey that helped me kind of uh, build a better way to manage those abstract, bizarre thoughts. Like I definitely still have like some very out there ideas that others would be like, what the hell are you talking about? And I'm just like, that's how my mind thinks, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But what I pay attention to is anytime that things become overwhelming to the point where I am like really feeling off is when flags start to go and where I'm just like, okay, something needs to change. And actually, I don't know how much time we got here, but there's
As
a
much as
specific.
you're willing to give me.
Okay.
Yes. I,
Well, I say this because there's a moment actually a couple of weeks ago where I had went out to I had the Dak Shepard thing, and then the following week I went out to Kentucky for something else, and I had to be back in Brooklyn the day after coming back from Kentucky. So I'd woken up at the to get to Kentucky to get home. I woke up at like 2 a.m. to get back to New York,
Mhm.
where my flight was early, and then I have to get a rental car and drive all the way down to Brooklyn for a presentation. I was doing a speaking engagement. And I just remember like on this drive, and I almost backed out of the speaking engagement because I was like, oh, I might really need to take a step back here.
Mhm.
Um, I was just like driving and I was listening to music, and there's an album by, it's called The Sound of Madness by, who's it by? Oh my God. Shinedown.
Okay.
Fantastic album.
Okay.
Anyways, the album's kind of about a mental break.
Mhm.
Anyways, the words were speaking to me were like
Mhm.
making me feel a certain way, and I'm like, oh man, this is starting to resemble some idea of reference or some delusion of reference where I'm starting to interpret these lyrics in a way that is really starting to challenge me, and um, and I immediately had to change the station to something that was more relaxing, more that I could separate from those type of thoughts because that's what I was starting to feel. And I was really stressed. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself that week. I was doing too much. I'm
Mhm.
aware of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
I made it through the day. I was like, you know what, I can make it through the day and then I can get sleep and then reset. And I did. Like I took it easy the next few days, but this is a daily reality, right? Where like I'm paying attention on a regular basis, being diligent about it and doing something about it when I start to become concerned. And then talking about it too. Like I told my partner soon after about that experience because
Yeah.
I was like, this was concerning to me and I got through it, but I want you to know that this is what was happening. And this is just an ongoing path of the recovery growth in which I've strived for ever since everything had happened.
Yeah.
So
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. It is. You can be triggered. You can get out of balance. And I think too that not you, us, right? Like anybody
yeah,
who struggles
yeah.
with mental health issues, which is why it's so important for the awareness piece and to look at things that might feel off balance and what can you let go of and say yes to something else where you might need, yes to sleep and no to something else. And then also surrounding yourself with people who recognize when you feel a little off balance and they can call
Hmm.
you out on that if you're missing it,
Hmm.
whether it's your best friend or your partner or your dad or, um, you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
which is
I
why I think
even,
the peer piece is so important to you because you're like, this is
yeah,
all going on in your head, and you're like, was anybody picking up on anything? Like, what could they have
yeah,
done?
yeah. And I even told a coworker about it too, right? Who's, checked in with me since. So it's like, you put in these, I know like a common therapeutic practice is planting seeds, right? And someone who might be unaware or struggling to see what they're actually going through, and you start planting seeds to help them bring that awareness. And to me, it works in this space too, where if I'm going through these difficulties, I'm planting the seeds in others just so that they're becoming a bit more aware of the potential challenges that I'm going through. And that helps too, right? Again, back to this interpersonal circle. And this is all separate from clinical space. I mean, clinical is always
Yeah.
a resource that is going to be in my back pocket and I'm going to pull it out. And I don't see a consistent therapist anymore. I've thought about getting another one many times. The schedule is too short, which speaks to a whole separate issue that I just don't have time. But you get my point. Like
Yes.
the personal space is just can be just as helpful as other various spaces, but and that's something that I think has definitely been very effective in managing my mental health.
Sure. Okay, my last question.
Yes.
Spirituality today, a higher power, nature, whatever it might be. I am always so curious.
Hmm.
You thought you were the prophet at one point.
Hmm.
How do you create a relationship with something bigger than yourself, if you do, when you've had that kind of experience? And you use the word like miracles in your book, and what happened between you and your dad was a miracle the way
Hmm.
that it unfolded. And um, I'm just so curious how you
Yeah.
separate, connect,
Yeah.
disconnect. Like,
That's a great question, and no one has asked me that yet. And that's a heavy one. That's a heavy one. Mainly just because a major part of my psychosis narrative in that state was very much influenced by these bigger concepts of religion and science and philosophy, and it really drove some of that narrative. That sentence I created was such a big part of it in the story. And I, continued to grapple with that ever since. But I think where I'm at with it now is I've read a lots of philosophical books. I do not subscribe to any particular ideology or path. I have my own view. And I have my own view and I feel comfortable with it and I'm with it, and it is, to some degree, it does, stem from some of those thoughts that I was having in psychosis. They're separate, but they're well, part of that experience, but they're still, you know, it's kind of like that fine line between delusion and madness. I'm sorry, between madness and logic, or delusion and logic, right? Where it's like some things can sound quite logical, but also like, okay, like I'm thinking of like Rene Descartes, right? Like the philosopher who was, yeah, questioned his own existence,
yeah,
um, which it's like, okay, like, am I real? Do I exist? Like, these are the things that
yeah,
dance that fine line between logic and delusion,
yeah.
and psychosis. So yes, I uh, I am still on that path, I guess, with that journey, but I feel comfortable and I feel comfortable in my skin, and I think I find comfort in my identity, which is probably the most important piece. Like, I'm Cohen, I'm a human, and I'm, doing things in my world that I like to do and I feel good with. And that's really important to me, because that's something that I lost in that psychosis experience.
Hmm. I have the chills. I feel like, isn't that what we all want?
Yeah. Yeah, and many people take many different paths to find some form of comfort with it, and I'm not gonna, judge or shame someone, or think differently if that's where they find comfort, in whatever ideology or religion that they might believe in. Um, but also, like, my my thought's very abstract, so I'm okay if others don't understand it or might not find comfort in it either. Like my partner, I try to talk to her about some of my philosophical ideas, and she's like, "I can't do it. I can't do it." I'm like, "That's okay. That's okay." Like,
Yeah, which is why I'm like, I'm all in, Cohen. I'm like, let's go. Do you have 2 hours? But no, because it's fascinating. The mind is fascinating. And for a lot of people, it's about calming the mind, and some of the grounding techniques you talk about with breath work and clasping your hands. And um, it's not to sound cheesy, but it is. It's one day at a time. And I think when we can kind of just focus on that and what's right in front of us, life becomes a little more manageable.
hmm yeah, definitely.
So I'm so glad Dax and his team found you, because then I found you and you opened up a whole new exploratory component in my own work, and just couldn't get enough of what you brought to the table. And I hope you told Dax that you would like to write a screenplay that he can direct, based on your book. So to be
That's funny
continued.
because I low key did a little
You,
bit.
hey,
Yeah, I'm still in it.
if you get
Uh,
in the room, you got to do it, right? But
no harm.
that's also something that I admire about you, and saying like, I'm just kind of in flow, whatever comes to me. Yes, it's a hustle at times to get your message out, but also it seems like the right opportunities are coming your way.
Yeah.
So thank you. Good luck in this transition with you know your story getting out there, and also the transition of being a newish dad. That's really
Yeah.
exciting and
I appreciate that.
scary and tiring and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely it's definitely tiring. Fortunately, she's a good sleeper, so we're good
Oh,
on. We've been pretty good. We've been pretty good with that.
that's
So
huge.
very
Good.
nice.
Good.
Yeah. She
Well,
knew. She knew. She's like, my dad's got to get his sleep. She knows already.
good. Well, I
Right.
will put the link to purchase your book in the show notes, as well as the link to your website if people are interested in booking you for speaking engagements. And my hope is that it just continues to reach more people, and it is a ripple effect. So
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much for having me and sharing my work. It means a lot. So thank you.
welcome. And to everybody listening, just a gentle reminder to be the change that you wish to see in the world, whether that starts with you, within your family, your community, or the world. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.